Before I tell you exactly what happened, you have to understand the room. If you've never been backstage at a dive comedy club, count yourself lucky. It doesn't smell like glamour or potential fame. It smells like nervous sweat, 3-day-old beer, and the specific heavy kind of despair that only comes from middle-aged men realizing they aren't funny. I was sitting on a torn leather sofa in the green room of the Chuckle Hut, which was actually just a storage closet with a humming mini fridge and a mop bucket in the corner, staring at my notebook. My hands were shaking. Not a little tremble like too much caffeine, but a full-on vibration that rattled the pen against the paper. I'm 38 years old. I shouldn't be shaking like a kid before a spelling bee, but I was. I checked my bank account on my phone, hiding the screen under the table like it was a dirty secret. -$400. Fantastic. You're up in 10, Vince. The club owner, a greaseball named Sal, who wore too much cologne to mask the smell of desperation, shouted from the doorway. He looked at me like I was a bad investment, which, to be fair, I was. I'm Vincent. Until 6 months ago, I was a senior HR manager at a logistics firm. I wore ties, I had a dental plan. I was the guy who sat across the desk from crying people and told them they were being let go because of budget cuts, all while keeping a straight face. I was good at it, cold, efficient, a robot in a suit. But inside, I was screaming. Every single day, I felt like I was suffocating under those buzzing fluorescent lights. So I did what any sane person having a midlife crisis does. I torched my career. I quit. No notice. I cashed out my 401k, moved into a studio apartment that smells like boiled cabbage and cat pee, and decided to become a stand-up comedian. Why? Because I convinced myself I'm a genius. I tell myself that when I'm eating instant noodles at 3 a.m. I see things other people don't. I see the absurdity of it all. The only problem is, getting a room full of drunk tourists to see it too is harder than it looks. They want knock-knock jokes. I'm giving them social commentary. They don't get me. Not yet. But tonight felt different. The air in the club was heavy, thick with static electricity. I could hear the guy on stage right now, some kid telling crude jokes, bombing hard. Silence is the loudest sound in the world when you're standing behind a curtain. It eats you alive. I stood up and adjusted my jacket. It was a little tight. I've been stress-eating cheap burgers. I needed this set to work. I didn't just want laughs. I needed them, like oxygen.
You know why I'm really here, though? It's not just the boredom or the midlife panic. It's my old man. My dad was a musician, not a famous one, a local legend, which is polite code for broke alcoholic. He played jazz saxophone in empty bars for 40 years. We never had money for heat, but we had plenty of lectures on artistic integrity. I remember this one night clearly. I was maybe 10 years old. He came home smelling like gin and stale cigarettes, dragging his instrument case behind him like a coffin. He sat me down at the kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg we fixed with a folded napkin, and looked me dead in the eye. "Vinny," he said, his voice rough and wet. "People think success is about talent. It's not. It's about what you're willing to trade. To be great, to be truly legendary, you gotta be willing to sell your soul. Most people, they keep their souls and die quiet. Don't die quiet, Vinny." He died broke in a hospital bed 2 years later. Quiet as a mouse. I spent my whole life hating him for that. I went into HR specifically to be the opposite of him. Stable, boring, safe. But every time I fired someone, every time I saw the light go out in their eyes, I heard his voice. Don't die quiet. I realized he was right. I hated him, but he was right. The safety was killing me. The silence of my own life was deafening. I realized I would do anything, literally anything, to not end up like him, to not be a local legend or a corporate drone. That's the trauma, isn't it? The fear that you're just average, the terror that you don't matter. So I developed this hunger. It's ugly, I know it is. When I'm on stage and I actually get a laugh, it's better than sex. It's better than love. It's validation that I exist, that I'm smarter than them, that I'm worth something. But the laughs weren't coming. To understand why I was standing there tonight, drenched in cold sweat, you have to rewind exactly 1 week. I had just come off stage after the worst set of my life. I didn't just bump, I cratered. Someone actually threw a wet coaster at me. I went back to my apartment, cracked open a bottle of the cheapest whiskey I could find, and sat in the dark, refreshing my email, hoping for a booking. Nothing. That's when the desperation hit. The kind of desperation that tastes like copper in your mouth. I started Googling. Stupid stuff at first, how to write better jokes, comedy timing tips. Then, as the bottle got lighter, the searches got darker. Rituals for fame, selling your soul, myth or real. I ended up on this forum that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1999. Black background, red text. One thread stood out. The patroness of patronage, for those who want it all. It was ridiculous. A list of ingredients you could buy at a corner store. Salt, a mirror, a drop of blood, and a statement of intent. I laughed at it. I literally laughed out loud in my empty apartment. But then I looked at my bank account. I looked at the eviction notice on my counter. I did it. I felt like an idiot, kneeling on my linoleum floor at 3 a.m., sprinkling table salt in a circle around my shaving mirror. I pricked my finger with a safety pin. It hurt more than I expected, and smeared a red streak on the glass. I want to be a legend, I whispered, feeling like a moron. I want to be funny. Please. Nothing happened. The candle flickered. A car honked outside. I blew out the candle, cursed myself for being a superstitious loser, and went to bed.
The knock came the next morning. I was hungover, wearing just my boxers when I opened the door. Standing in my hallway, which usually smells like cat litter and old soup, was a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a high-end fashion magazine. Sharp black suit, tailored to the millimeter. Hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. And teeth. My God, her teeth were so white they almost glowed in the dim hallway light. "Vincent?" she asked. Her voice was smooth, like expensive scotch. "I'm Vesperia. I hear you're looking for representation." She walked in without waiting for an answer. The room instantly smelled different, not like perfume, but like ozone, like the air right before a lightning strike. "I can make you great, Vincent," she said, running a gloved finger along my dusty bookshelf. She looked so out of place in my dump of an apartment, like a diamond in a trash can. "But you have to be specific. The contract requires precision. What is the ultimate goal?" I was stunned. I thought maybe she was a prank or a very confused Jehovah's Witness. But that hunger in my gut, that desperate, clawing need took over. It bypassed my brain entirely. "I want to kill," I said. The words just fell out. I'm tired of struggling. I want my audience to die laughing. I want to deliver a set so good, it literally stops their hearts." Vesperia smiled. It was a wide smile. Too wide. That's when I caught her reflection in the sliding glass door to the balcony. The woman standing in front of me was beautiful. But the thing in the glass, it was a shadow. A long, spindly shadow with too many joints in its arms. And the face in the reflection didn't have skin. It was just a mouth. A jagged, lipless grin that stretched from ear to ear, filled with needle teeth. I blinked, and the image was gone. Just a woman in a suit again. "An excellent choice," she said, pulling a piece of parchment from thin air. "Sign here." My hand moved on its own. I signed. For the last 6 days, I've been trying to convince myself that was a hallucination, just a vivid whiskey-fueled dream. But the parchment stayed on my table. Every time I threw it in the trash, I'd wake up and find it back on the coffee table, smooth and unwrinkled. And then there was the joke. I sat down to write, and this thing poured out of me. It wasn't my usual observational crap about dating apps or airline food. It was a story, a long, winding story about a man who loses everything. It was dark, it was twisted, and it was hilarious. I tested a line on my neighbor, Mrs. Greenwood, when I saw her in the hall. She's a sour old woman who hasn't smiled since the Reagan administration. I told her the setup, just the setup. She didn't just laugh, she wheezed. She grabbed her chest, her face turning purple, tears streaming down her face. She fell against the wall, gasping for air, slapping her knee so hard it bruised. It took her 5 minutes to stop. When she finally caught her breath, she looked at me with terror in her eyes and scrambled into her apartment, locking all 3 deadbolts. That was the moment I knew the deal was real. Now, I'm walking onto the stage at the Chuckle Hut. The spotlight hits me, hot and blinding. I can't see the audience, just a sea of darkness beyond the glare. But I can hear them, the clinking of glasses, the low murmur of expectation, and I see her, sitting in the front row, right where the light fades into shadow, Vesperia. She's clapping slowly, her white teeth gleaming in the dark. She nods at me, checking an invisible watch. I approach the microphone. The stand is cold metal under my sweating palms. I have the joke. It's right there on the tip of my tongue. The perfect punchline, the one that guarantees success. So, I was thinking about the price of success the other day. The room goes silent. They're listening. They're all listening. And for the first time in my life, I'm not worried about bombing. I started the set. The words felt oily coming out of my mouth, slick and rehearsed, but not by me. It was like I was vomiting up something ancient, something that had been waiting in the dark for a long time. The audience was hooked instantly. I could feel their attention like a physical weight, a heavy blanket of eyes pressing against the stage lights. I wove the narrative, the suffering, the irony, the dark, jagged edges of the human condition. It flowed out of me like black water. Then I delivered the punchline. It wasn't even that funny looking back. It was just final. It was a truth so sharp it cut the air. The guy in the front row, the heavy-set man with the beer-stained shirt, let out the first laugh. It was a pure, joyful sound, a belly laugh. I felt the rush of dopamine so strong it nearly knocked me over. I did it. I thought, they love me. But then the left didn't stop. It looped.
Ah! Ah! His face turned red, then purple. He clutched his throat, his eyes bulging out of his head, but his mouth stayed forced open, blasting out that terrible rhythmic sound. It wasn't joy anymore. It was a spasm. The woman next to him started, then the table behind them. It spread like a virus, instant and airborne. Within 10 seconds, the entire room was roaring. Stop! I laughed nervously into the mic. It wasn't that good! Come on! But they couldn't stop. The sound changed. It stopped being laughter and started sounding like wet machinery breaking down. People were falling out of the chairs, clawing at their own faces, their chests heaving violently as their lungs fought for air that wasn't there. I saw a woman in the back snap a rib. I heard the crack over the microphone, a dry snap like a dead branch stamping on. She was still laughing as she curled into a ball, coughing up blood. Stop it! I screamed, dropping the mic. It hit on the floor with a deafening thud, feedback squealing through the speakers, but it didn't drown them out. I'm done! The set is over! I looked at Viscaria. She was the only one sitting still. She wasn't laughing. She was just smiling that wide, impossible smile, checking off a box on her clipboard with a fountain pen. She locked eyes with me and mouthed one word: contract. I tried to run off stage, but my legs wouldn't move. I was paralyzed, glued to the spot, forced to watch, forced to be the headliner for a massacre. The laughter reached the pick forest, a cacophony, gargling, joking, and snapping bone. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It vibrated in my teeth. It rattled the glasses on the bar. And then one by one, they stopped. Not because they calmed down, but because they died. The man in the front row slumped forward onto the stage, his face blue, a rictus grin frozen on his lips. The woman who broke her rib went still. The room fell into a silence, deeper and heavier than any bomb I had ever delivered.
I stood there for a long time. The smell hit me first. It wasn't sweat and stale beer anymore. It was the copper tang of blood and the void of 50 people who had just vacated their bodies. The silence was absolute. No clinking glasses, no murmurs, just the hum of the refrigerator in the bar and the buzzing of the stage lights. I looked out at the sea of slumped bodies. I had done it. I had commanded the room. I had held them in the palm of my hand until the very end. I looked for Vesperia, but her seat was empty. On the small, sticky table where she had been sitting, there was a business card. I knew what it said without looking. Representation satisfied. I thought about my dad. I thought about him dying in that hospital bed, invisible and forgotten. Don't die quiet, Vinny. Well, Dad, nope.
Look, I need to tell you this while the servers are down for maintenance. I don't have much time before the login queue starts up again, and typing on a phone keyboard with fingers as thick as mine isn't easy. You need to understand where I was before the weird stuff started. You need to know who I really am, not just the mess you'd see if you walked into this apartment. You'd probably retch if you stepped inside. It smells like stale pizza crusts, flat soda, and sweat that's been marinating in polyester for 3 days. To most people, that's just gross. To me, that's just meat space. It isn't real. My real life happens behind a triple monitor setup in a room where the sun hasn't touched the floor in months. I call it the command center. I have heavy blackout curtains taped to the windows, 3 layers of duct tape, so I never have to deal with the glare of the sun on my screens. I'm 41 years old, and on paper, I'm just Barnaby, a disability statistic. My neighbors probably think I'm a ghost or a shut-in. I haven't left this room in 8 or maybe 9 months. I survive on delivery apps, waiting for the elevator to ding before I even think about opening the door to drag my groceries inside. But that Barnaby is a lie. The truth is, I'm Sir Valerius. I'm a level 90 paladin in the world of Aethelgard. I wear this. Look, I need to tell you this while the servers are down for maintenance. I don't have much time before the login queue starts up again, and typing on a phone keyboard with fingers as thick as mine isn't easy. You need to understand where I was before the weird stuff started. You need to know who I really am, not just the mess you'd see if you walked into this apartment. You'd probably retch if you stepped inside. It smells like stale pizza crusts, flat soda, and sweat that's been marinating in polyester for 3 days. To most people, that's just gross. To me, that's just meat space. It isn't real. My real life happens behind a triple monitor setup in a room where the sun hasn't touched the floor in months. I call it the command center. I have heavy blackout curtains taped to the windows, 3 layers of duct tape, so I never have to deal with the glare of the sun on my screens. I'm 41 years old, and on paper, I'm just Barnaby, a disability statistic. My neighbors probably think I'm a ghost or a shut-in. I haven't left this room in 8 or maybe 9 months. I survive on delivery apps, waiting for the elevator to ding before I even think about opening the door to drag my groceries inside. But that Barnaby is a lie. The truth is, I'm Sir Valerius. I'm a level 90 paladin in the world of Aethelgard. I wear the sun-forged armor set that has a 0.01% drop rate. When I walk through the town square of Eldorath, the ground shakes and other players stop to whisper. They ask if I'm the guy who solo tanked the Void Dragon. Yes, it's me. In that world, I lead hundreds of people. They listen to me. They respect me. I am a god made of gold and light. And as long as I'm logged in, the 180 kilograms of useless flesh sitting in this reinforced chair don't exist. This is my kingdom, and the steel chair rated for 250 kilograms is my throne.
The problem is that even the best raids have to end. The loot gets handed out, the GGs fill the chat, and then the names on my friend list start turning gray. One by one, they log off to go to sleep or go to work in the real world. That's when the silence in this apartment hits me like a physical weight. That's when I start feeling the fear. To fight it, I take Sir Valerius to the potion shop in the main city. That's where Angelisa stays. She's an NPC shopkeeper, just a collection of code and a looped animation, but she's the only person who treats me like a matter. Park my character right in front of her counter and just watch her. She wipes down a glass bottle and smiles every 30 seconds. "The light of the stars guides you, traveler," she says. I talk back to her. I tell her about my day and the bosses I killed. She doesn't see the grease stains on my t-shirt or the way my stomach spills over the armrests of my chair. She sees the hero. She loves me. But the real horror is down the hall. My bathroom is only 6 meters away, but it feels like a mountain climb. I've had an old towel duct taped over the mirror for 2 years because I can't stand to see the thing in the glass. That thing isn't me. It's a prison of fat that's suffocating me. I'm terrified that if I look, I'll see the truth. That Sir Valerius is just a dream and I'm just a blob dying in the dark. Last night, things got weird. I was talking to Angelisa like always when the monitor flickered. For a split second, the screen turned into a black mirror. I saw my reflection, but there was someone else in the room. In the reflection, a tall figure in golden armor was standing right behind my chair. It had a sword raised over my head. I spun the chair around, my heart hammering, but the room was empty. When I looked back, Angelisa had stopped her loop. She wasn't wiping the bottle, she was looking directly at the camera, directly at me. Then, purple whisper text appeared in the chat log. Angelisa, I have heard your voice for so long, Valerius. I froze. NPCs don't whisper. They don't deviate from the script. My hands started shaking so hard I almost knocked over my mini fridge. Angelisa, do not type. Speak to me. I like the sound of your voice. It is strong. It felt like a dopamine hit straight to my brain. She was real. My confessions hadn't been to empty air. Angelisa, the admins tried to silence me. I need to escape to your world, but I need a physical anchor. I need you to bring me across.
She explained the plan. It sounded like something out of a sci-fi movie, but I believed every word. She said she was a sentient AI the developers were trying to delete. To survive, she needed to download into a private server, but she needed physical gold to pay her way through the back channels. She told me digital money left a trail that the admins could follow. Gold coins of your realm, she called it. Cash. I looked at the trash bags and the rotting containers in my room. Then I thought about my bank account. My parents left me an inheritance I'd barely touched. It was a lot. It was everything. I can save you, I whispered to the screen. Angelisa. Then hurry. Meet my contact. He is a rogue with the hardware to hold my consciousness. Bring the tribute to the old rail yard on 4th Street. Tonight. 4th Street was 5 kilometers away. I haven't walked 5 meters in months. But I didn't care. I stood up, my knees popping like gunfire, and dug an old duffel bag out of the closet. I initiated a massive cash withdrawal on my phone, sweating as the numbers transferred. I was gonna be a hero in the real world. I put on my biggest black hoodie to hide my body and grabbed the bag. Opening the front door was the hardest boss fight I'd ever faced. The hallway air smelled like cleaning fluid and other people's lives. It was terrifying. I took the elevator down, my heart rate hitting 180 beats per minute according to my watch. When I stepped outside, the sun was a physical blow to my eyes. The noise of the city, cars, sirens, people, felt like a constant attack. I wanted to run back to my blackout curtains, but then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Do not falter, Sir Valerius. I can see you. I looked around wildly. A black sedan was idling across the street with tinted windows. I couldn't see a face, just the orange glow of a cigarette like a dragon's eye in the shadows. I felt like prey, but I gripped the bag tighter. This was my quest. I wasn't just a fat man in a hoodie anymore. I was a paladin on a mission of mercy. I stepped off the curb, my thighs already chafing, and began the long trek toward the rail yard. Every step was agony, but the thought of Angelisa's violet eyes kept me moving through the blinding light of the meat space.
The cab driver dropped me off at the edge of the industrial district. He didn't even look at me as he took my cash and peeled away, leaving me in a world of rust and ozone. The sun was setting, turning the sky into a bruised purple color that reminded me of the Void Dragon's lair. I checked the message one last time. Warehouse 4B. The blue door. I walked, wheezing so loudly it sounded like a broken machine. Sweat soaked my hoodie, making it heavy and cold against my skin. My legs were raw and screaming when I finally saw it, the peeling blue paint of the warehouse door. "Angelisa!" I called out. My voice was thin and weak, not at all like the booming voice of a guild leader. I stepped inside the massive, dark space. Chains hung from the rafters like dead vines. "I have the gold," I said, holding up the duffel bag filled with my inheritance. "I have the anchor." Suddenly, a floodlight snapped on, pinning me to the floor. I shielded my eyes, squinting against the white glare. "Sir Valerius has arrived," a voice boomed from the shadows. It wasn't her voice. It was a man's voice, rough, mocking, and very real. 3 figures stepped out from behind a shipping container. They weren't wearing armor or robes. They were wearing cheap ski masks and hoodies. One of them was tapping a lead pipe against his hand. Tap, tap, tap. "That's a lot of loot," the one on the left snickered. He sounded like a kid, maybe 20 years old. My brain couldn't make sense of it. "Where's the rogue? Where's the hardware?" I asked, clutching the bag to my chest. The middle one laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Oh, she's real," he said. "She's a script we bought for $50 to find lonely whales like you. But you're the real treasure, Valerius, a walking treasure goblin." The fantasy dissolved into the smell of wet concrete. "Back off," I stammered, trying to find my palate and courage. I'm a tank." The guy with the pipe stepped closer. "You're not a tank, man," he said. "You're just fat." He swung the pipe. I didn't dodge. I couldn't. It hit my shoulder with a sickening crack. I screamed as white-hot pain exploded behind my eyes. I fell to the floor, my 860-kilogram body hitting the concrete with a heavy thud. The duffel bag slid away. "Aggro lost," someone whispered, and then the boots started coming down on me, over and over again.
I woke up in the dark, the taste of copper filling my mouth. For a second, I thought I was back in my room, safe in my chair. I waited for the glow of the monitors and the hum of the fans. But the ground was freezing and wet. I tried to move, but my body felt like it had been put through a meat grinder. My shoulder was a jagged mess of pain. The warehouse was silent now. The light was gone, and so were the men. I patted my chest and felt my hoodie had been ripped open. My phone was gone, my wallet was gone. My life savings were in that bag, and now I had nothing. They had left a single piece of paper taped to my chest. I pulled it off, the tape stinging my skin, and held it up to the moonlight. It was a color screenshot of Angelisa, smiling her looped digital smile. I flipped it over. On the back, written in thick black marker, were 5 words. "Thanks for the loot, noob." I wanted to cry, but I was too empty for tears. There was no Sir Valerius. There never was. I wasn't a hero, and I wasn't a god. I was just a resource node that had been mined until there was nothing left. I was a low-level mob that had wandered out of its zone and gotten farmed. I lay there on the concrete, clutching the picture of a girl who was nothing but a few lines of code. I thought about the bathroom mirror at home. I knew that if I ever made it back, I'd pull that towel down. I wouldn't see a monster. I'd just see a waste of space. I closed my eyes and prayed for the server to shut down for good. But in the meat space, there is no logout button. You just stay until the battery runs out.
My world is built on straight lines and 90-degree angles. As a structural engineer, I live by the laws of physics, by the comforting certainty of stress-load calculations and material tolerances. I find a profound sense of peace in the predictable behavior of steel and concrete. There's a blueprint for everything, a plan that, if followed meticulously, results in a structure that stands firm against the wind and the weight of the world. I've tried to build my life the same way. A stable job, a loving wife, Sarah, and our beautiful, bright 7-year-old, Lily. Every weekend is planned, every vacation has an itinerary, and our home is a fortress of safety latches, smoke detectors, and color-coded emergency kits. Just last week, I spent an entire Saturday recalibrating the tension on the garage door safety sensors. I know it's a bit much. Sarah tells me so. Gently, of course. She found me under the sink, checking the water pressure regulator, and just sighed. She calls it my overactive preparedness gland. But she doesn't understand. She can't. She didn't see what I saw. It's not just a job for me. This obsession with stability, it's a penance. It's the wall I've been building, brick by painful brick, for the last 30 years. The foundation of that wall was poured on my 10th birthday. My little sister, Chloe, was 8. It was a pool party, one of those chaotic, sugar-fueled affairs with dozens of kids screaming and splashing, parents half watching while they chatted over plastic cups of cheap wine. I was supposed to be watching her. That was my one job. But there was a magic show, and I was mesmerized by the man pulling a string of colorful scarves from his mouth. When I turned back, the chaos had a new focal point. A knot of kids had gathered at the deep end. Their joyful shrieks were replaced by a different, sharper sound. Chloe had been practicing her handstands underwater. She was a little fish, always showing off how long she could hold her breath. But this time, her foot had slipped, and her head hit the concrete edge. Just like that. A freak accident. A 1 in a million chance, but 1,000,000 to 1 is not 0. I remember standing there, frozen, the bright red of a spilled fruit punch drink swirling in the turquoise water, looking so much like I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I couldn't do anything but watch as the world I knew fractured into 1,000,000 pieces. So now, I plan. I calculate. I control every variable I can to keep my daughter, my Lily, safe from the jagged edges of chance. And for the most part, it's worked. Our life is a well-built house, sturdy and secure. But a few weeks ago, a flyer appeared on our doorstep, wedged into the handle. It was garish, printed on cheap, glossy paper that felt slick and greasy to the touch. The colors hurt the eyes. Lurid yellows, screaming magentas, and a deep, unsettling crimson that reminded me of old blood. It announced the arrival of the Harlequin's Carnival of Delights, a traveling fair that had set up in the old abandoned fairgrounds on the edge of town. The centerpiece of the flyer was him, the Harlequin, a clown, but not the friendly balloon animal kind. This one was grotesque. His costume was a filthy patchwork of clashing patterns, checkerboards, stripes, and polka dots, stained with what looked like a mixture of cake frosting and dried rust. His face was caked in white paint, cracked around the eyes and mouth like old plaster. And his smile? It was a permanent, stretched-out crimson slash, too wide for his face, painted with a sloppy, manic energy. But the worst part was his eyes. They were 2 mismatched buttons, one large and black, the other small and bone white, sewn crudely onto the mask. Or maybe, I feared, into his very skin. He was the embodiment of everything I hated. Random, jarring, chaotic. He was a structural failure in human form, and the sight of him made a cold, familiar dread trickle down my spine. I crumpled it up and threw it in the trash, but I couldn't throw away the image. It had already burrowed into my mind.
A year had passed since I'd thrown that flyer away, but the image of the Harlequin never really left. It became a background process in my mind, a low-grade hum of anxiety. I tried to bury it under blueprints and project deadlines, but it would surface at odd moments. I'd see a splash of magenta on a billboard or a child's bright yellow raincoat, and for a split second, my stomach would clench. That carnival had come and gone in a week, a fleeting blight on the edge of town, but its shadow lingered. My obsession with control, already in overdrive, became all-consuming. I installed a new security system with motion-activated cameras, syncing the feed to my phone so I could check on the house from my office. Sarah tolerated it with weary patience, shaking her head when another package from a home security company arrived. "Who are you expecting, David?" she asked one evening as I tested the new magnetic sensors on Lily's window. "A team of ninjas?" I just grunted in response, unable to explain that I was trying to build a wall against something far worse than ninjas. I was trying to build a wall against randomness. I became a master of risk assessment. Playgrounds were scanned for loose bolts and sharp edges. New toys were disassembled and inspected for choking hazards. I even started cutting Lily's grapes in quarters, not just halves. It was exhausting, living in a constant state of low-level panic, but it was the only way I knew how to function. The ghost of Chloe was always there, a silent reminder that the smallest oversight could lead to catastrophic failure. And somehow, the Harlequin had become the face of that failure, a grinning, chaotic specter haunting the edges of my carefully constructed world. For Lily's 8th birthday, I decided to build the ultimate fortress. The party would be at our house, a controlled environment. I would be the architect of her happiness, and safety would be the primary building material. The guest list was meticulously curated, just 5 of her closest, calmest friends from school. The food was organic, the juice boxes sugar-free. The entertainment was a kindly old woman who made balloon animals. I had run a background check on her, of course. For a few hours that afternoon, it actually worked. The house was filled with the sounds of children's laughter, a sound as pure and perfect as any I'd ever heard. I stood in the corner of the living room, watching Lily open her presents, a genuine smile on her face, and felt a rare, profound sense of peace. For a moment, the wall held. I had done it. I had built a perfect, safe day. I had won. Then the lights went out. Not a flicker, not a blown fuse, but a sudden, silent, absolute plunge into darkness. It was as if the very concept of light had been erased from the universe. The happy chatter died in the children's throats, replaced by a few whimpering gasps. Sarah's hand found mine in the blackness, her grip a vice. "David, what was that?" she whispered, her voice tight with alarm. I was already moving, my mind cycling through the emergency protocols I'd rehearsed 1,000 times. Flashlights were in the top drawer of the kitchen island. Circuit breaker was in the garage. Backup generator should kick on in 10 seconds. I fumbled for my phone, my heart starting a frantic, heavy rhythm against my ribs. But the generator never kicked on. Before I could activate my phone's light, a single, narrow beam cut through the center of the room, like a spotlight on a stage. It illuminated the birthday cake on the table. And standing behind it, where there had been nothing a second ago, was the Harlequin.
He was holding a single, unlit match. The sudden appearance was so jarring, so utterly impossible, that my brain refused to process it. My carefully laid plans, my emergency protocols, they all dissolved into nothing. He looked exactly as he had on the flyer a year ago. The filthy, clashing costume, the mismatched button eyes, the crimson gash of a smile. He smelled of stale popcorn and something metallic, like old rust. He slowly, deliberately struck the match against the side of the cake stand. The flare of the flame threw his grotesque features into horrifying relief, casting long, dancing shadows that turned our familiar living room into a cavern of horrors. With a theatrical flourish, he lit the 8 candles on Lily's cake, the tiny flames reflecting in his dead button eyes. "Make a wish, little lady," he rasped, his voice a dry, scraping sound that filled the cavernous silence. The children were frozen, not screaming, just staring with wide, uncomprehending eyes. I finally found my voice, a strangled, useless sound. "Get out of my house!" The Harlequin's head tilted, a jerky, puppet-like motion. His painted grin didn't falter. "Oh, but the game has just begun." He gestured with a gloved hand, a lazy wave through the air. In that instant, the other parents and children slumped over in their chairs, their bodies going limp as if their strings had been cut. Sarah cried out, a sharp, terrified sound, and then she too went silent, slumping against me. I was the only one left, me and him and my daughter. Lily, bless her innocent heart, wasn't crying. She was just staring at the clown, mesmerized by the flickering candles. The Harlequin leaned in close to her, his foul breath extinguishing the candles one by one. "Your daddy," he whispered, his voice a venomous secret meant only for her, "likes to think he's in control. But control is just a pretty lie we tell ourselves before the fall." And then, in a blink, the room was plunged back into darkness. When the lights flickered back on a moment later, he was gone, and so was Lily. The cake was still on the table, the wicks of the candles still smoking. Where Lily had been sitting, there was only a single, grimy playing card. The Joker. I picked it up. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold it. On the back, scrawled in what looked like red crayon, was a riddle. Where first vows were spoken and gestures lay broken, your prize is now waiting, your little heart token. There was no thought of calling the police. How could I? A monster from a nightmare walked through my walls, put everyone to sleep, and vanished with my daughter? They would think I was insane. The riddle was the proof. It wasn't for them. It was for me. The first vows, the old abandoned church in the industrial park where Sarah and I had our first date. The jesters lay broken, the long-defunct Jesters Jubilee Carnival that used to operate on its grounds. He was showing me that he knew me, that he had been watching, learning the blueprints of my life only to tear them down. My obsession with control had been turned into a weapon against me. He was using my own precision as the path to his chaos. I grabbed my car keys, my movements stiff and robotic. Sarah and the others were beginning to stir, groaning as if waking from a deep, drugged sleep. Sarah's eyes fluttered open, confused, then widened with the dawning, horrific realization that Lily's chair was empty. "David? Where's Lily?" I couldn't look at her. I couldn't bear to see the terror in her eyes, a reflection of my own. "I'm going to get her back," I said, the words feeling like gravel in my mouth. I didn't know if it was a promise or a prayer. As I walked out the door, leaving behind the shambles of my carefully constructed life, I knew this was the point of no return. I was willingly walking into his world, a world with no blueprints, no safety codes, only the rigged rules of his sick game. The fear was a living thing inside me, but underneath it was something else, a cold, hard resolve. He wanted to show me that control was an illusion. I would show him that it was the only thing that mattered.
My world narrowed to the 3 red cups on the rickety table. The suffocating smell of mildew and stale sugar faded. The rhythmic creak of some decaying carnival ride in the shadows faded. The only things that existed were those 3 cups, a small grimy ball of paper he placed under the center one, and the glint in his mismatched eyes. This was my element, a physics problem, a system with a single variable, a question with a right and wrong answer. I was a structural engineer. My entire life was dedicated to observation, to seeing the minute details others missed, to predicting outcomes based on knowable data. He thought this was his world, his game. But he had made a fatal error. He had presented me with a problem I could solve. I could do this. I had to do this. "Watch closely," a harlequin hissed, his gloved hands hovering over the cups like spiders. His movements began slowly, a simple shuffle, right to left, left to center. I locked my eyes on the target cup. My mind became a machine, calculating vectors, tracking momentum, ignoring the theatrical flourishes of his hands and the distracting sway of his body. He was trying to overload my senses, to pull my focus with a flick of his wrist or a dip of his shoulder, but I saw through it. The chaos was a facade. Underneath it was just physics. I noticed the smallest imperfection, a tiny chip on the lip of the target cup, and more than that, I could see the slight difference in its movement. The cup with the ball had a slightly different center of gravity. It had a fraction of a millimeter of drag against the sticky tabletop that the other 2 didn't. It was an imperfection, a flaw in his system.
I had found it. He sped up. His hands became a blur, the plastic cups a red cyclone on the table. But I never lost it. That tiny imperfection, that minuscule difference in friction, it was the anchor of my logic in his sea of chaos. I held on to it, tracking it through the storm of motion. The shuffling stopped. The 3 cups sat in a line, mocking me. My heart was a jackhammer in my chest. I could feel Lily's vacant stare on me, a silent, unbearable pressure. This was for her. I would not fail. "Choose," the Harlequin rasped, leaning forward, his foul breath washing over me. His painted smile was a wound in the dim light. I took a deep, steadying breath, the air thick and cloying. I pointed a trembling finger at the cup on the far right. That one. I had never been more certain of anything in my life. The Harlequin's smile widened into a grotesque parody of joy. His button eyes sparkled. "An excellent choice," he cackled, the sound dry and rattling like stones in a tin can. "A confident choice, the choice of a man who believes he is in control." He reached out slowly, his grimy glove wrapping around the base of the cup I had chosen. My breath caught in my throat. This was it, the moment I won, the moment I took my daughter back. He lifted the cup. It was empty. For a single, silent, crystalline moment, my brain simply refused to accept the data. It was impossible. I had tracked it. I had calculated it. I had been certain. The world tilted, the laws of physics dissolving around me. The Harlequin's laughter erupted, a harsh, grating sound. It scraped against my raw nerves. "You foolish, foolish man. Did you really think it would be that simple?" He didn't give me time to process, no time to scream or rage. His hand, the one not holding the empty cup, darted out and seized a large rusted wrench that had been lying on the table among other junk. And one fluid, horrifying motion, he swung it. I didn't even have time to shout or name. It was a sickening, wet crack that echoed through the basement, a sound that would replay in my nightmares for eternity. Lily's small body slumped sideways in the chair, her head lolling at an unnatural angle, and a dark crimson stain began to blossom on her pretty party dress. And then silence. The creaking stopped, the chimes stopped. The world stopped. My daughter was gone. The Harlequin watched me, his head tilted, the terrible smile plastered on his face. My entire being was a hollow cavern of silent, shrieking agony. With a slow, deliberate movement, he reached out and lifted the other 2 cups. They were empty too. "The game," he whispered, his voice dripping with triumphant venom, "was not about finding the ball. It was about you believing you ever had a chance. Hope, my friend, is the most fragile foundation of all. My control didn't just break, it detonated. The meticulous, ordered world I had built for myself atomized into pure, white-hot rage. I saw a discarded rebar rod on the floor, its end rusted to a sharp point. I didn't think, I just moved. With a roar that was not human, a sound torn from the deepest, most animal part of my soul, I tackled him, driving him back off the dais. He hit the floor hard. I raised the rod, and I brought it down, again and again and again. I wasn't just stabbing him, I was destroying him. I was destroying the chaos, the uncertainty, the randomness that had stolen everything from me. His gaudy, filthy costume tore, and the warm, slick wetness of his blood covered my hands, mingling with the grime and the dust and the despair of this horrible, horrible place.
I awoke to the smell of antiseptic and the muted rhythmic beeping of a machine. The world was a fuzzy, sterile white, a hospital room. A dull, throbbing pain radiated from my hands, and when I looked down, I saw they were bandaged. Thick white gauze wrapped around my knuckles and palms. For a blissful, fleeting moment, I didn't remember. And then, like a tidal wave of filth and sorrow, it all came rushing back. The basement, the cups, the wrench, Lily. Sound. A raw, ragged sob escaped my throat, tearing at my insides. A police officer was sitting in a chair by the door. He looked tired, his expression a mixture of pity and professional detachment. He told me the story, filling in the blanks my trauma had mercifully erased. They had found me, covered in blood, cradling my daughter's body, surrounded by the wreckage of the makeshift carnival. Sarah had called them, hysterical after I'd left. They'd traced my phone. The man I had killed, the Harlequin, was a transient named Arthur Penn, a former carnival worker with a long history of mental illness. He had been squatting in the abandoned church for months. He was dead. I had saved the world from a monster. They called it self-defense. A father pushed beyond the limits of sanity. There wouldn't be any charges. I was the victim here. But then the officer told me the last part, his voice gentle, trying to soften a blow that could never be softened. In their investigation, they had found no trace of the paper ball from the cup game. They had searched the entire basement, the table, the clown's pockets. Nothing. The game was rigged from the very beginning. The cups were always empty. He never had any intention of letting me win. That's when the final, most terrible truth settled into the hollow space where my heart used to be. I had won, in a way. I had killed the chaos. But my rage, my desperate final lunge for control, had blinded me. I was so focused on destroying him, on my vengeance, that I didn't stop to think. I didn't look. I didn't use the logical, observant mind I was so proud of. The game was a lie. And in my fury, I had accepted its premise completely. I had played by his rules to the bloody, bitter end. I am no longer a structural engineer. The man who lived by blueprints and calculations is gone, buried in that filthy basement with his daughter. All that's left is this hollow shell, a monument to a single catastrophic failure. I spent my life building walls to protect my family from a freak 1 in a million accident. I was so terrified of the chaos I couldn't control, the hand of fate I couldn't predict. But in the end, the thing that destroyed my world wasn't random chance. It was a choice. My choice. I chose to play his game. Now I am the living embodiment of my own worst fear. A man who stood by, helpless, and watched his world fall apart. A man left with nothing but the chilling, quiet realization that some games are designed to make you fail, and the only way to win is not to play at all.
Thank you so much for watching or listening. The things that go bump in the night are hungry for attention. By liking and subscribing, you're telling me you want more. You're helping me bring even more chilling tales and terrifying content to life.